From the god of criminals to the youngest investigator, Su Ming's lazy genius hides a mind that sees through every crime. But can he escape the magnet of chaos that always pulls him back in? Chapter 1. A Quiet Life Interrupted. Su Ming stared at the ceiling, his thoughts drifting lazily through the early morning haze. The soft hum of the city filtered through the windows of his family's estate. It was peaceful, too peaceful if such a thing existed. After all, peace was what he had been chasing ever since he was reborn into this world. At 12 years old, Su Ming was a child by the world's standards, but his mind held decades of experience. In his previous life, he'd been feared as the god of criminals, a mastermind of chaos, deception, and control. But that was a different world, a different life. He had escaped that fate, or so he thought. This time, he muttered to himself, "I'll live quietly. No more schemes. No more chaos." He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Today was supposed to be a simple day. A trip to the mall, maybe, to pick up a few things. Nothing more. Simple. Quiet. He wanted to believe it. From downstairs, he could hear his sisters chatting over breakfast, their lively voices carrying through the house. 7 of them, all excelling in their fields, from law enforcement to medicine, business to the arts. And then there was him, the 8th child, the gifted one. Or at least, that's what his family believed. To them, Su Ming was a prodigy, showing flashes of brilliance in ways he couldn't, or wouldn't, explain. Gifted? If only they knew. He rolled out of bed, pulling on his jacket as he prepared to leave. A simple errand at the mall. No crime, no drama. He wouldn't allow it. The bustling mall was filled with people, families shopping, couples strolling, and children running around. Su Ming wandered, blending into the crowd. His eyes darted from one store to the next, making mental notes of escape routes, blind spots, and security weaknesses out of habit. Old instincts, no matter how much he tried to suppress them, were hard to shake. He stopped in front of a bookstore, casually browsing the shelves when he heard it, a scream, followed by the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. Of course, he thought bitterly. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as the situation unfolded before him. A man, masked and wielding a knife, had taken a woman hostage near the jewelry store. A robbery, by the looks of it. The security guard had been overpowered, and a small crowd was gathering, frozen in fear. Su Ming sighed, stuffing his hands in his pockets. He didn't want to get involved. He didn't need to get involved. The police would handle it, surely. But as his eyes scanned the scene, his mind, sharp and calculating, had already begun piecing together the details. The man's stance was shaky, his grip on the knife loose. Amateur. There were 6 potential exits he could take, and none of them were secured. The hostage was panicking, making herself more of a liability. The criminal's attention was split, and he was glancing toward the jewelry counter, clearly prioritizing the loot over the woman's safety. It was too easy. Su Ming shifted his weight, tempted to walk away, but his legs wouldn't move. The itch in his brain grew stronger, the need to fix the situation gnawing at him. Just ignore it, he told himself. Let someone else handle it. But the crowd was too stunned to react, the security too slow. The hostage was crying now, her knees buckling as the knife pressed closer to her neck. Time was running out. His hand twitched. It always ended up like this. With a resigned sigh, Su Ming stepped forward, quietly making his way through the onlookers. He had no intention of being a hero, but leaving a crime scene unfinished, it wasn't in his nature. He approached the robber from behind, moving swiftly through the crowd until he was within reach. The man never saw him coming. With a swift, practiced motion, Su Ming twisted the robber's arm, disarming him before he could react. The knife clattered to the floor, and before the criminal could even cry out, Su Ming had him pinned against the wall, his face pale with shock. "You're sloppy," Su Ming whispered, tightening his grip. "Too many mistakes." The crowd erupted into cheers as security finally rushed in, taking the man into custody. The hostage was led away, still in shock but alive. Su Ming let out a long breath, stepping back into the crowd as if nothing had happened. He didn't wait for the gratitude or attention. He didn't want it. As he walked away, Blending back into the flow of mall-goers, he muttered to himself, "I just wanted a quiet day." But deep down, he knew the truth. No matter where he went, no matter how hard he tried to escape it, crime would always find him. It was his curse, a constant shadow that followed him, whether he liked it or not. And once again, peace had slipped through his fingers. Chapter 2. Family Ties and Expectations. Su Ming returned home, the echo of the mall's excitement still ringing in his ears. He stepped through the ornate doors of his family's estate, greeted by the familiar scent of home-cooked meals wafting from the kitchen. The comforting sounds of his sister's laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the chaos he'd just left behind. "Su Ming, you're back," his eldest sister, Su Mei, called out from the dining room, her smile brightening the space. As the successful businesswoman of the family, she was used to commanding attention, but she also had a softer side that surfaced when it came to her siblings. "How was your day?" asked Su Ying, the family's top hacker, her eyes glinting with curiosity as she sat cross-legged on the sofa, her laptop open in front of her. Su Ming shrugged, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Just went to the mall?" His sisters exchanged glances, their interest piqued. Su Mei leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Did anything exciting happen? You always seem to find trouble wherever you go." Su Ming's mind flicked back to the robbery, the adrenaline still fresh. "Not really. Just shopping." "Shopping? That's boring." Su Ling, the family's rising star in the arts, chimed in from the corner. "You should have joined me at the gallery instead." As the banter continued, Su Ming felt the familiar weight of expectations settle on his shoulders. They all believed he was gifted, and that he would follow in their illustrious footsteps. The eighth child of a prestigious family, he was expected to excel academically and professionally. But he wasn't interested in living up to their ideals. He didn't want to be the prodigy they all envisioned. "Are you going to the police academy meeting later?" Su Shui, the country's best doctor, asked, breaking through his thoughts. He hesitated. The police academy meeting was supposed to be a platform for potential candidates to showcase their skills. But for Su Ming, it felt like another trap, a way for the family to push him toward a career in law enforcement. "I might skip it," he replied, hoping his sisters wouldn't press further. "Come on, Su Ming," Su Ying insisted, her eyes narrowing playfully. "You know you're the best candidate there. Everyone will be expecting you." "Yeah, no pressure or anything," he replied dryly, but the warmth of their camaraderie was undeniable. They cared about him, even if their expectations felt overwhelming. As the conversation continued, Su Ming's mind wandered to the criminal network he was secretly involved with. He had built connections and friendships with influential figures in law enforcement from other nations, all while maintaining his cover. But the more he interacted with his family, the more he feared being discovered. They believed him to be a naive child, gifted but innocent. Yet his past life loomed over him like a dark cloud, and with each moment of peace, he felt its presence growing heavier. It was almost laughable. The universe had given him a second chance, and here he was, slipping back into the chaos. Later that evening, the family gathered around the dining table. Su Ming watched as they shared stories, their laughter filling the air, but he felt like an outsider. They were celebrating victories he had no part in, achievements that seemed to shine brighter than his past. He was surrounded by warmth and love, yet loneliness crept in, reminding him of the choices he had made. When dessert was served, he excused himself, opting for a moment of solitude on the balcony. The cool night air felt refreshing against his skin, but the city lights below pulsed with a life he couldn't quite reach. He could hear the distant sirens and the whispers of crime that lingered in the shadows, calling to him. As he leaned against the railing, he couldn't shake the feeling of being a magnet for trouble. The crime magnet phenomenon was not just a nickname, it was a fact. No matter where he went, crime seemed to follow. It frustrated him and made him question his existence. Was this a blessing or a curse? He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind. The truth was he thrived on the thrill of solving cases, the adrenaline of the chase. But he wanted to keep that part of himself hidden from his family, to protect them from the darkness that had once consumed him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, breaking the quiet moment. It was a message from one of his contacts in the criminal intelligence network, an alert about a drug shipment being transferred to another nation. The details were murky, but it piqued his interest. This was the kind of information that could lead to something significant. Just one more case, he thought, torn between his desire for a peaceful life and the unrelenting pull of his past. He could investigate quietly, maybe even share the information with the police without revealing his true identity. But would they believe me? As the stars twinkled overhead, Su Ming found himself at a crossroads. Would he once again step into the shadows to solve a case, risking everything he had built, or would he let it pass, accepting the quiet life he yearned for? With a resigned sigh, he typed a quick response to his contact, feeling the familiar thrill of excitement course through him. In this world, he may have been reborn as a child of privilege, but deep down, he knew he would always be drawn to the chase. Chapter 3: The Academy Meeting. The next day dawned bright and clear, casting a golden hue over the sprawling estate of the Su family. Su Ming awoke early, his mind racing with thoughts of the police academy meeting. He had tried to convince himself to skip it, but the idea of missing out on valuable information gnawed at him. As he dressed, he couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation mixed with dread. The academy was where future law enforcement officers honed their skills, and the atmosphere buzzed with ambition and competition. It was a breeding ground for those destined to uphold the law, and potentially a place where he could find clues to solve cases from the shadows. The large auditorium was filled with hopeful recruits, their youthful faces brimming with enthusiasm. Su Ming entered quietly, scanning the room for familiar faces. The stage at the front was adorned with the insignia of the police academy, a symbol of honor and responsibility that he felt weighed heavily upon him. "Su Ming!" A voice called out, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Li Chun, his closest friend and fellow candidate. A dedicated student with a bright future, Li Chun was the perfect blend of charm and intellect. "Hey, Li Chun," Su Ming replied, forcing a smile. "Ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Li Chun said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I heard they're going to reveal some advanced investigation techniques today. This is our chance to impress the instructors." Su Ming nodded, appreciating his friend's enthusiasm. "Yeah, I guess so." As the meeting began, the head instructor, a stern-looking man with a reputation for excellence, took the stage. His booming voice echoed through the auditorium as he outlined the academy's goals and the challenges the recruits would face. "Today, we will be discussing advanced investigation techniques and how to utilize modern technology in solving crimes," the instructor declared. "You will need to adapt quickly. The world of crime evolves every day. Are you ready to rise to the challenge?" A chorus of eager voices responded with enthusiastic shouts of yes. Su Ming sat quietly, absorbing the information. While the techniques were cutting edge, he couldn't help but notice the gaps in their knowledge. Many methods mirrored what law enforcement in the 1990s would have used, lacking the advanced tools he was familiar with from his past life. As the instructor demonstrated a forensic analysis technique, Su Ming's mind began to wander. He recalled the sophisticated equipment he had once used to solve complex cases, the cutting-edge technology that felt worlds apart from what was being taught. The urge to speak up bubbled within him, but he held back, not wanting to draw attention to himself. After the demonstration, recruits were divided into groups for practical exercises. Su Ming found himself paired with a girl named Lin Zhao, known for her sharp analytical skills and fierce determination. She had a reputation for being a top student, but her stubbornness often clashed with others. "Let's impress the instructors," Lin Zhao said, her tone businesslike as they approached their exercise station. "Right? What's our scenario?" Su Ming asked, trying to mask his nervousness. "A robbery at a jewelry store," she replied, her eyes gleaming with competitive fire. "We need to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and solve the case." Su Ming nodded, recalling his past experience. The details of his former life flooded back. The thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of solving a case. But he had to tread carefully, not wanting to reveal too much. As they worked together, Su Ming was impressed by Lin Zhao's skills. She had a keen eye for detail, But there were moments when she overlooked crucial aspects that could lead to a breakthrough. It was then that his instincts kicked in, and he couldn't resist offering guidance. Wait, what about the CCTV footage? We should analyze that first, he suggested, pointing toward the area designated for evidence collection. Lin Zhao frowned, her competitive spirit flaring. That's not part of our assigned tasks. Maybe, but it could give us leads, Su Ming insisted, feeling the tension between them grow. After a moment's hesitation, she relented. Fine, let's check it out. To Su Ming's surprise, the footage revealed a crucial detail: the suspect's unique jacket, visible as they fled the scene. Excitement bubbled within him, and he turned to Lin Zhao, who was now animated with enthusiasm. See? We could have missed this, she exclaimed, a grin spreading across her face. As they pieced together the evidence, their teamwork improved. Lin Zhao's confidence grew, and for the first time, Su Ming felt a sense of belonging in this environment. They completed their exercise successfully, earning praise from the instructors. Later, as recruits gathered for feedback, Su Ming noticed the instructors whispering among themselves. Their furtive glances in his direction sent a chill down his spine. Did they suspect something about him? The last thing he wanted was to draw attention to his abilities. Once the meeting concluded, he and Li Chen stepped outside, where the sun cast warm rays across the campus. That was impressive, Li Chen said, clapping Su Ming on the back. You know how to think on your feet. Thanks, but I just did what needed to be done, Su Ming replied, trying to play it cool. As they walked, Su Ming's mind raced. The academy was filled with opportunities, but the pressure was mounting. He couldn't afford to let his past overshadow his future, yet it felt like a constant shadow following him. Hey, Li Chen interrupted his thoughts. You coming to the after-party tonight? Everyone's going to celebrate our first day. Su Ming hesitated, glancing back at the academy. The idea of mingling with his fellow recruits felt daunting, but he didn't want to isolate himself. Sure, I'll be there, he said, forcing a smile. Great, I'll see you later then. Li Chen waved before disappearing into the crowd. As Su Ming made his way home, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something significant. The academy offered a chance to navigate the fine line between his two lives, and for the first time, he felt the thrill of hope. But as always, the shadows loomed, waiting for the moment he would slip and reveal his true self. He needed to remain vigilant, ready to tackle whatever lay ahead. Chapter 4: The Afterparty. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink as Su Ming prepared for the afterparty. He glanced at himself in the mirror, smoothing his hair back with a practiced hand. The academy had introduced him to new faces, and tonight he would meet them in a different light, one filled with laughter, camaraderie, and perhaps a hint of competition. Arriving at the venue, a spacious hall decorated with colorful banners and lights, Su Ming felt the electric energy of excitement. The atmosphere buzzed with chatter and laughter, creating a sense of belonging he had longed for since his arrival. Li Chen spotted him across the room and waved, beckoning him over. Su Ming, you made it. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Su Ming felt his nervousness begin to dissipate. Of course, I wouldn't miss it, Su Ming replied, taking in the lively scene. Music played softly in the background as groups of recruits mingled, exchanging stories and laughter. Come on, let's grab some drinks, Li Chen suggested, leading him toward the refreshment table. As they moved through the crowd, Su Ming scanned the room, observing interactions among his fellow recruits. He noticed the subtle dynamics at play, alliances forming, rivalries brewing, and hidden tensions simmering beneath the surface. After filling their cups, they found a quieter corner of the hall, away from the thrumming crowd. So, what do you think of the academy so far? Li Chen asked, leaning against the wall. It's intense, Su Ming admitted, sipping his drink. But I think it's exactly what I need to sharpen my skills. Li Chen nodded. Yeah, I can see you're going to be one of the top students. Just don't forget to have fun, too. We're here to enjoy ourselves. Su Ming smiled, grateful for his friend's support. But as he watched a group of recruits across the room, he felt a familiar tug of unease. A pair of eyes lingered on him, their gaze sharp and calculating. He didn't recognize the boy who watched him from the shadows, but the intensity in his expression made Su Ming wary. "Who's that?" Su Ming asked, nodding subtly toward the figure. Li Chen followed his gaze and frowned. "That's Wang Jie. He's been around the academy for a while, and he's got a reputation for being competitive. Just watch out for him. He plays dirty." "Got it," Su Ming replied, his instincts on high alert. In his previous life, he had encountered countless rivals who thrived on manipulation and deceit. He would not underestimate this one. As the evening progressed, Su Ming mingled with other recruits, sharing laughter and stories. He began to relax, enjoying the feeling of acceptance among his peers. However, the shadow of Wang Jie loomed in the back of his mind, an ever-present reminder that he had to be cautious. "Hey, Su Ming!" A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lin Zhao, her expression bright as she approached. "I'm glad you could make it." "Thanks, Lin Zhao. How's it going?" Su Ming asked, genuinely pleased to see her. "Pretty good. I'm just getting to know everyone. You did amazing during that exercise earlier. I've never seen anyone analyze evidence so quickly," she complimented, her tone friendly yet competitive. "Thanks. You were great too. I couldn't have done it without your insights," Su Ming replied, enjoying the back-and-forth banter. Just as the conversation began to flow, Wang Jie approached, a smug grin plastered across his face. Well, if it isn't the new star and his little cheerleader," he taunted, his eyes flicking between Su Ming and Lin Zhao. "What do you want?" Wang Jie. Lin Zhao shot back, her annoyance evident. "We were having a conversation. I just wanted to see what all the fuss was about." "I've heard a lot of whispers about the brilliant Su Ming," he sneered, taking a step closer. "Just remember, this isn't just a game. If you want to win, you'll have to play by the rules." Su Ming felt a simmering anger rise within him, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I'm just here to learn, Wang Jie. If that bothers you, maybe you should focus on your performance." Wang Jie's expression darkened for a moment, but he quickly recovered, a cruel smile returning. "Careful, Su Ming. You might find that your past won't stay buried forever, especially with the way you attract trouble." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving a palpable tension in the air. Lin Zhao turned to Su Ming, her brow furrowed. "Ignore him. He's just trying to get a rise out of you. Don't let it get to you." "I won't," Su Ming replied, though the unease lingered in his mind. "But I have a feeling this isn't over." As the night continued, Su Ming found himself torn between wanting to relax and remaining vigilant. The after-party was meant to be a celebration, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that it was also a testing ground for the power struggles lurking beneath the surface. As he moved through the crowd, he noticed that the energy of the room shifted. Groups of recruits began to gather around a makeshift stage, where an impromptu game had formed. The stakes were high, with challenges designed to test their wits and skills. Su Ming watched with growing interest, feeling the competitive spirit tug at him. "Are you going to join in?" Li Chen asked, nudging him. "Maybe. What are they doing?" Su Ming asked, leaning in to listen. "Challenges to see who can solve the most puzzles or complete tasks the fastest. It's a great way to show off our skills," Li Chen explained, excitement shining in his eyes. Su Ming hesitated, but felt a spark of determination. Perhaps this was a chance to establish himself among his peers and shake off the shadows of doubt. "Let's do it," Su Ming decided, a confident grin spreading across his face. As he joined the circle, the atmosphere ignited with anticipation. Cheers erupted as recruits showcased their talents, and Su Ming found himself swept up in the excitement. He tackled challenges with ease, his mind racing as he solved puzzles and navigated obstacles, each success building his confidence. But as he gained attention, he couldn't shake the feeling that Wang Jie was watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The thrill of competition buzzed around him, but the shadows of his past and the weight of rivalry loomed large. As the night wore on, Su Ming felt exhilarated and exhausted. Yet deep down, he knew that this was just the beginning. The struggles he faced at the academy would be only a reflection of the greater challenges ahead. He would have to stay vigilant, navigate alliances, and confront rivals, all while balancing the complexities of his dual life. Stepping back from the chaos of the crowd, Su Ming took a moment to breathe, realizing that he could never truly escape the shadows. They would follow him wherever he went, like a lingering specter, reminding him that he was destined to face the criminal world once again. Chapter 5: Secrets in the Shadows. The next few days at the academy were a whirlwind of lectures, drills, and camaraderie. Su Ming found himself increasingly drawn into the rhythm of his new life. The after-party had left a mark, and he was determined to prove himself, not just as a skilled recruit, but as a valuable asset to his peers. As he settled into a routine, Su Ming also became acutely aware of the delicate balance he had to maintain. No one knew about his past life, nor the vast experiences he carried within him. He had been reborn into a world filled with possibilities, yet every step forward felt like a dance on the edge of a blade, with danger lurking just beneath the surface. One afternoon, as they wrapped up a particularly grueling physical training session, Li Chen approached him, breathless but exhilarated. "You did amazing out there, Su Ming. I don't think anyone could keep up with you," he exclaimed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thanks, but it's just practice," Su Ming replied, trying to downplay his achievements. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had an advantage rooted in memories of a life filled with strategies and maneuvers, not meant for this world. "Just practice?" Li Chen raised an eyebrow. I heard rumors that you might join the Special Investigations team after the next assessment. They don't just pick anyone for that." The idea sent a thrill through Su Ming, but he quickly suppressed it. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I still have a lot to learn," he said, forcing a smile. He was eager for the opportunity, but knew that the attention could attract unwanted scrutiny. As they walked toward the cafeteria, they passed by the training grounds where a group of recruits had gathered. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Su Ming spotted Lin Zhao among them, her eyes sparkling as she engaged in animated conversation. "Hey, let's go see what's happening," Li Chen suggested, steering them toward the crowd. As they approached, Su Ming realized that a challenge was taking place. A few recruits were demonstrating their skills in lockpicking, a vital component of their training. It was a risky move, but it showcased their talents. "Think you can handle it?" Li Chen nudged him, grinning. "You seem to have a knack for these things." Su Ming hesitated. Lockpicking was something he had mastered in his previous life, and he felt an overwhelming urge to show off. But he was also aware of the potential repercussions. If he displayed his skills too openly, it could draw the attention of rivals and mentors alike. "I think I'll pass this time," Su Ming replied, trying to sound casual. "But I'll cheer you on." Just then, Wang Jie emerged from the back of the crowd, his presence commanding attention. "What's the matter, Su Ming? Afraid you might not be as good as you claim?" he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. A few recruits snickered, but Su Ming held his ground, refusing to give Wang Jie the satisfaction of a reaction. "No, just saving my energy for more important challenges," he retorted, forcing a confident smile. "Important challenges?" Wang Jie echoed, feigning shock. "I didn't realize you had the luxury of picking and choosing. I thought you were just here to keep up with the rest of us." Su Ming could feel the tension in the air, a thick blanket of hostility that threatened to suffocate him. "Let's see how you do then," he challenged, hoping to divert attention away from himself. "Fine. Watch and learn," Wang Jie declared, stepping forward to showcase his skills. The crowd parted as he confidently approached the lock. He fiddled with the mechanisms, expertly demonstrating his technique, much to the crowd's delight. Su Ming crossed his arms, maintaining his composure. Despite the taunts, he knew that he had to remain focused. Wang Jie's showmanship was calculated, and Su Ming understood that he had to play his cards right. After Wang Jie finished his demonstration, the crowd erupted in applause. Su Ming felt a mix of admiration and frustration. While Wang Jie excelled in his performance, it only amplified the scrutiny Su Ming faced. "Come on, Su Ming. Just give it a shot," Li Chen urged, his voice encouraging. "Yeah, don't let him get to you," Lin Zhao added, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. Su Ming hesitated, battling with his instincts. He could demonstrate his abilities, but at what cost? Would it expose him to scrutiny, or could it potentially turn the tide in his favor? "All right, I'll give it a go," Su Ming decided, stepping forward. The moment he took center stage, a hush fell over the crowd. The eyes of his peers were on him, and the weight of their expectations pressed heavily on his shoulders. As he approached the lock, he focused on the mechanics, shutting out the noise around him. Memories of his past life flooded his mind, guiding his hands through the familiar motions. He quickly assessed the lock's configuration, feeling the rush of adrenaline as he manipulated the tools. With a flick of his wrist, the lock clicked open, and the crowd erupted into cheers. Su Ming felt a surge of triumph washes over him, a reminder of the skills he had honed in another life. But as he basked in the moment, a nagging thought remained. He was now firmly on Wang Jie's radar. As the celebration subsided, Su Ming caught a glimpse of Wang Jie, his expression darkening with envy. The challenge had only ignited a spark in their rivalry, and Su Ming knew he had to remain vigilant. Later that evening, as Su Ming returned to his dorm, the weight of the day settled heavily on him. He sat at his desk, surrounded by textbooks and notes, but his thoughts drifted elsewhere. The threat of Wang Jie lingered, a reminder that the academy was more than just a place of learning. It was a battleground for power and influence. In the quiet of his room, Su Ming pondered his next steps. He needed to tread carefully, balancing his skills and instincts with the need to maintain his cover. As he lay down, he could almost feel the shadows closing in, reminding him that danger could strike at any moment. With his heart racing and thoughts swirling, Su Ming closed his eyes, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. In this new life, secrets and shadows would intertwine, and he would have to navigate the perilous waters of rivalry, friendship, and the ever-looming threat of his past. Chapter 6. An Unwelcome Magnet. The weeks passed, and Su Ming settled into the rhythm of life at the academy. He had developed a reputation for his laid-back demeanor, which often masked a keen intellect that drew attention when least expected. Though he yearned for a quiet life filled with laziness and leisure, he found himself unable to escape the gravitational pull of crime. One lazy afternoon, Su Ming lounged on the sofa in the common room, flipping through channels on the television. His 7 sisters had left the house for their various commitments, and the silence was a welcome reprieve. He had planned to spend the day playing video games, a perfect way to avoid the responsibilities of his studies and investigations. Just as he settled into his gaming, a loud commotion erupted outside. Groaning, he turned off the console and trudged to the window. A small crowd had gathered in the street, murmurs of excitement and distress filling the air. Su Ming sighed, feeling the familiar tug of curiosity mixed with reluctance. "Why does crime have to follow me everywhere?" he muttered under his breath, rubbing his temples as he pulled on his jacket. He reluctantly made his way outside, knowing he couldn't resist the urge to investigate. As he approached the scene, he discovered a small shop had been robbed. The owner, an elderly man, stood outside, visibly shaken, recounting the events to an officer. The officer took notes, but Su Ming noticed the gaps in their investigation, details the officer seemed to overlook. "What happened?" Su Ming asked, stepping closer to the gathering crowd. The shop owner looked up, his eyes filled with frustration. "They took my money and some precious antiques. I can't believe this is happening." Su Ming's analytical mind kicked into gear. He casually observed the surroundings, noting the position of the door, the broken window, and the scattered items on the ground. "Did you see the thief?" he asked. The owner shook his head. "I was busy in the back. I didn't see anything." "You mentioned antiques. Did anyone know they were here?" Su Ming pressed, recalling a conversation he had overheard earlier in the week about the shop's rare collectibles. "I told a friend about them," the owner replied. "But I didn't think anyone would." Su Ming pieced together the scenario. The robbery was planned, likely by someone who knew the antiques were valuable. He could feel the tension in the air, and as he opened his mouth to suggest an angle for the investigation, he hesitated. He had no desire to involve himself in this mess, yet the pull of the case was undeniable. Instead, he stepped back, trying to merge into the crowd. "I should just go home," he whispered to himself. But as if summoned by fate, an officer he recognized from the academy approached him. It was Officer Chun, a no-nonsense cop known for her diligence. "Su Ming?" "What are you doing here?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "I was just passing by," he replied, feigning indifference. "I don't want to get involved." "Not even a little bit," she challenged, crossing her arms. "Your insights would be valuable. We could use your keen eye for detail." The way she looked at him made it clear that his reluctance only intrigued her further. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing back at the scene. As much as he wanted to return to his game, something compelled him to stay. "Fine, but I'm just observing," he conceded, a reluctant grin forming. "I'm not solving anything." Officer Chen nodded, a satisfied smile on her face. Every little bit helps. As the investigation unfolded, Su Ming found himself gravitating toward the details. He offered suggestions about the direction the thieves might have fled and pointed out possible witness locations. Officer Chen listened intently, impressed by his observations. By the end of the day, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Thanks to Su Ming's input, the investigation led to a suspect who had been seen lurking around the neighborhood days prior. The officers moved quickly, and within hours, they apprehended the thief, recovering most of the stolen items. As the crowd dispersed, Su Ming felt a familiar sense of annoyance mingled with exhilaration. "I can't believe I got pulled into this," he grumbled to himself. Later that evening, as he returned home, he contemplated the day's events. Su Ming had wanted nothing more than a lazy day to indulge in his hobbies, but it seemed the universe had different plans. Crime had a way of following him, like an unwanted shadow, no matter how much he tried to evade it. Back in his room, Su Ming sank into his chair, the tension of the day slipping away. He leaned back, closing his eyes as he recalled the thrill of piecing together the clues. For a moment, the thought of being a detective, a role he hadn't actively pursued, seemed oddly appealing. Yet he pushed it away, unwilling to embrace the implications of that path. As he opened his eyes, he couldn't help but smirk at his own predicament. He might be the youngest son in a prestigious family, yearning for a peaceful life, but fate had other plans for him. Perhaps, in some twisted way, he was destined to be a magnet for crime. "No more distractions," he whispered to himself. "Tomorrow I'm going back to my video games." But deep down, he knew that no matter how hard he tried to distance himself from crime solving, it would always find a way back to him. Chapter 7. The Price of Indifference. The next morning dawned with a peculiar energy, one that hinted at the chaos Su Ming was trying so desperately to avoid. He woke up groggy, having stayed up late to play video games after the previous day's unexpected excitement. Determined to reclaim his lazy lifestyle, he decided to skip breakfast and head straight to the academy, hoping to avoid any potential distractions. As he arrived at the academy, he was greeted by the usual hustle and bustle of students rushing to their classes. Su Ming slipped into the building, trying to blend into the background. He was just about to head to his first lecture when a familiar voice called out to him. "Su Ming, wait up!" It was Li Wei, a fellow student and friend who often found himself involved in various schemes. Li Wei approached, a wide grin on his face. "You won't believe what happened yesterday. Did you hear about the robbery at the antique shop?" "I was there," Su Ming replied, suppressing a sigh. "I saw it firsthand." "No way!" Li Wei exclaimed, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Did you help solve it?" "I just observed," Su Ming said, waving a hand dismissively. "I wasn't involved, but you always seem to be at the center of these things," Li Wei insisted, nudging Su Ming playfully. "It's like crime has a special invitation just for you." Su Ming chuckled, though he didn't share the enthusiasm. "Trust me, I'd rather it didn't." As they made their way to class, Li Wei continued to speculate about Su Ming's mysterious knack for finding himself during chaos. "You should embrace it. You could be the youngest special investigator ever," he suggested with a dramatic flair. "I'm not interested," Su Ming replied, rolling his eyes. "I prefer my lazy life. Thank you very much." The class began, but Su Ming's thoughts drifted back to the previous day's events. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about crime solving that intrigued him. As much as he tried to avoid it, there was a thrill in piecing together clues, a rush of adrenaline that he secretly enjoyed. After class, Su Ming decided to take a detour on his way home, planning to visit the mall. He aimed to lose himself in the world of shopping and entertainment, hoping for a peaceful afternoon. But as he wandered through the crowded halls, he felt a sense of foreboding creeping in. Just one lazy day, he murmured to himself, attempting to ward off any impending drama. But, as if on cue, a sudden commotion erupted from a nearby jewelry store. Not again, he groaned. Curiosity tugged at him, and despite his initial resolve, he found himself gravitating toward the chaos. A group of masked individuals was hurriedly shoving jewelry into bags as panicked customers scrambled for safety. The store alarm blared, piercing through the noise of the mall. Su Ming stood frozen for a moment, watching the scene unfold. Adrenaline coursed through him, and his instinct to help kicked in. He quickly scanned the area, noting the exits and the positions of the robbers. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Damn it. He cursed under his breath, sprinting toward the nearest emergency exit. He spotted a mall security officer rushing in, clearly outnumbered by the robbers. "Hey, over here!" Su Ming shouted, waving his arms. The officer looked confused but moved in his direction. "We need to surround them. They can't escape if we cut off their exits." As he outlined his plan, the officer nodded, understanding the urgency. Together, they directed customers towards safety while attempting to block off potential escape routes for the robbers. With swift precision, Su Ming coordinated the security response, leveraging his awareness of the layout to outmaneuver the criminals. It was like a game, one that he was surprisingly good at. "Nice work, kid," the security officer praised as they prepared to move in on the robbers, who were now starting to panic. "I'm not a kid," Su Ming protested, but a smile crept onto his face. The thrill of the moment was intoxicating, despite the danger. As the officers moved in, the robbers attempted to flee, but they were met by a wall of security and a few brave mall patrons. The chaos quickly subsided, and within minutes, the situation was under control. The robbers were apprehended, and the stolen goods were recovered. Afterward, as Su Ming caught his breath, he felt a mix of exhilaration and frustration. He had once again been drawn into a situation he had desperately tried to avoid. "Su Ming!" Officer Chen approached him, her expression a blend of admiration and exasperation. "You were involved again? You need to stop making a habit of this." "I didn't mean to," he protested, holding up his hands defensively. "I just wanted a day off." "Sure, but your instincts are too sharp to ignore," she said, crossing her arms. "You could make a difference if you embrace this side of yourself." Su Ming sighed, the weight of her words sinking in. He loved his family and wanted to live a quiet life. Yet crime had an undeniable way of finding him. It was becoming increasingly clear that he could not escape his fate. As he left the mall, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for more than just a lazy life. Maybe, just maybe, there was a reason he kept getting pulled into these situations, a reason he hadn't yet uncovered. And with that thought lingering in his mind, he headed home, preparing to face the inevitable discussions with his family about the day's event. Chapter 8. Shadows of Normalcy. Days turned into weeks, and life at the academy settled into a familiar routine for Su Ming. He buried himself in his studies, attempting to focus on his coursework and ignore the growing whispers about his involvement in the thwarted robbery. Despite his efforts to lead a quiet life, it seemed that fate had other plans. One afternoon, Su Ming decided to visit a local park, seeking solace among the trees and the gentle rustle of leaves. He hoped the fresh air would clear his mind. As he walked along the winding paths, he spotted a group of children playing soccer, their laughter filling the air. It was a simple scene, yet it reminded him of the carefree moments he yearned for. "Hey, Su Ming, come join us," one of the kids called, waving a ball in his direction. Su Ming smiled, but shook his head. "I'm just here to relax. You guys have fun." He continued his stroll, appreciating the vibrant colors of the flowers blooming along the path. However, that peace was shattered when a frantic voice pierced the tranquility. "Help! Someone's stealing my bike!" Instinctively, Su Ming turned to see a teenage boy pedaling away on a bright red bicycle, the owner chasing after him, shouting for help. A wave of annoyance washed over Su Ming, but he couldn't ignore the situation. "Stay here," he called to the children as he took off after the thief. The chase began, and Su Ming's heart raced as he pursued the bike thief through the park. The boy weaved through trees and around benches, but Su Ming's determination pushed him forward. He felt the familiar thrill of adrenaline coursing through his veins, a stark reminder of the chaotic world he was trying to escape. "Stop!" Su Ming shouted, his voice echoing through the park. "You can't get away with that." As they approached the park's exit, the thief glanced back, fear flashing in his eyes. With a burst of speed, Su Ming surged ahead, using the park's layout to his advantage. He remembered the self-defense techniques his sisters had drilled into him, and as the thief turned to flee down a side street, Su Ming cut him off. In one swift motion, he tackled the boy to the ground, pinning him down. "You've made a mistake," Su Ming said, breathless but firm. "Let me go," the thief protested, struggling beneath Su Ming's grip. A nearby vendor had witnessed the chase and rushed over, clearly ready to help. "I'll call the police," he said, pulling out his phone. Su Ming stood back as the vendor restrained the boy. The adrenaline of the chase slowly faded, replaced by a sense of exasperation. He hadn't wanted to get involved, yet here he was, a hero once again in the eyes of onlookers. "Who was that kid?" someone murmured. "He caught the thief all by himself. Looks like a natural." Su Ming felt the heat rise to his cheeks as the attention shifted toward him. All he wanted was a peaceful day, yet he couldn't escape his reputation as a crime magnate. As the police arrived and took the thief into custody, Su Ming slipped away from the gathering crowd. He wandered through the park, feeling a mix of pride and frustration. He had acted instinctively, yet this wasn't the life he wanted. Later that week, as he prepared for a quiet evening at home, he received a text from Li Wei. "Join us at the academy for the movie night. It'll be fun. No crime in a movie, right?" Su Ming sighed, but agreed. "Sure, why not? I need some normalcy." At the academy, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement as students settled in for the screening. Su Ming grabbed popcorn and found a seat with Li Wei and a few other friends. The movie began with a lighthearted comedy that made everyone laugh. Yet, even amidst the laughter, Su Ming's mind wandered. How long could he ignore the gravity of his situation? It seemed that every attempt to detach from crime-solving only pulled him deeper into it. As the movie reached a pivotal moment, an unexpected commotion erupted at the back of the auditorium. Su Ming turned to see a group of students whispering urgently, pointing toward a figure attempting to slip out of the room. "Isn't that the guy who got kicked out for cheating?" Li Wei whispered. The air shifted, and Su Ming felt the familiar pull of responsibility. The film faded into the background as he observed the tension. He had sworn to avoid involvement, yet something inside him urged him to act. "Wait here," he said, rising from his seat. He couldn't let this pass, not when it felt like another opportunity to prove himself, even if it was against his better judgment. As he approached the back, the figure turned, panic flashing in his eyes. "I'm just leaving. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Why are you sneaking out?" Su Ming asked, his tone steady. "What are you hiding?" Before the boy could answer, the theater manager appeared, his face taut with anger. "You again? I told you not to come back. You can't just waltz in here." The tension in the air crackled, and Su Ming sensed the weight of expectations. He hadn't wanted to be involved in this, but now it seemed impossible to turn back. He stepped forward, determined to confront the issue head-on. "Let's figure this out," he said, trying to diffuse the situation. "There's no need for any more drama." As the manager and the boy exchanged heated words, Su Ming found himself trapped between wanting to enjoy his life as a student and being drawn back into the chaos of crime and conflict. When he finally returned home that evening, the weight of the day hung heavy on his shoulders. He had tried so hard to lead a lazy, carefree life, yet crime followed him like an inevitable shadow. Perhaps it was time to accept that his path was set, whether he liked it or not. Chapter 9. The Ties That Bind. The following days brought a semblance of normality to Su Ming's life, yet the nagging feeling of impending chaos lingered like a dark cloud overhead. He had hoped that the small incident at the academy would be the last he'd encounter for a while, but fate had a different plan. One evening, as he settled into his room with a book, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Jean, a member of his community network. Su Ming had initially joined to exchange information on criminal activities around the globe, but now he found himself conflicted about his involvement. Urgent. Need your help. There's been a spike in thefts in the downtown area. Meet at the cafe on Elm Street. Su Ming's heart sank. He had promised himself he would take a step back from crime solving, but the allure of uncovering something significant was hard to resist. With a resigned sigh, he replied, "I'll be there." The cafe was a cozy spot, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods. As Su Ming entered, he spotted Jean sitting at a corner table, his expression serious. "Thanks for coming," he said, motioning for Su Ming to sit. "I know you're trying to stay out of this, but we need someone with your skills." "What's going on?" Su Ming asked, wary of getting pulled deeper into the web of crime. There have been multiple reports of high-end electronics being stolen, and they all lead back to one location. "The police aren't making progress," Jean explained, leaning closer. "I think it's an inside job." Su Ming considered the implications. If there was indeed an inside job, it could lead to bigger criminal networks, perhaps even ties to organized crime. "So what's the plan?" he asked, already feeling the familiar pull of excitement. "We need to gather intel on the suspected location. If we can identify the culprits, we can report them to the police," Jean said, his eyes gleaming with determination. "I'm not sure if that's a good idea," Su Ming replied, recalling his earlier resolve. "I don't want to be involved in this." "Come on, Su Ming. You know you're good at this. Plus, if you help us, it might keep you in the clear with your family." "They won't suspect anything if you're helping the community," Jean urged. With a heavy heart, Su Ming realized he was already trapped. He could deny his nature, but it wouldn't change who he was. Reluctantly, he nodded. "All right, but I want to keep this low-key. No big risks." As they discussed their approach, Su Ming couldn't shake off the unease settling in his stomach. The thrill of the chase and the rush of adrenaline were tempting, but they also brought back memories of his past life. Memories he wanted to forget. The next day, Su Ming and Jean set out to gather information. They decided to stake out a warehouse rumored to be the hub for the stolen goods. As they arrived, Su Ming felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the building, but the shadows loomed large, creating a sense of foreboding. They parked a safe distance away and observed the area. "Look at that guy," Jean whispered, pointing to a burly figure loitering near the entrance. "He doesn't belong there." Su Ming narrowed his eyes. "Let's keep watching." As the hours passed, they took notes on the comings and goings of various individuals. The atmosphere grew tense as darkness enveloped them. Su Ming could feel his pulse quicken as he recalled the danger that often accompanied these situations. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from inside the warehouse. Su Ming exchanged a worried glance with Jean. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," Jean replied, his eyes wide with concern. "Let's go check it out." They crept toward the entrance, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. As they reached the door, they could hear raised voices inside. Su Ming's heart raced. This was it, the moment he had been dreading, yet secretly anticipating. "Why aren't the goods ready? We can't afford to lose any more shipments," a voice shouted, followed by the sound of something heavy being thrown against the wall. "What if the police show up?" "We need to be careful," another voice replied. Su Ming gestured for Jean to stay back. "Let's get some evidence," he whispered, pulling out his phone to record the commotion. He wanted to gather information to pass along to the authorities. As they edged closer, a sudden noise made them freeze. A group of men burst out of the warehouse, their faces masked and eyes narrowed. Su Ming's instincts kicked in. "Run," he hissed, grabbing Jin's arm. They sprinted back to their car, hearts pounding in their chests. As they jumped inside, Su Ming's mind raced. They had stumbled into something dangerous, and the reality of their situation hit him hard. "We need to tell the police," Jean gasped, still catching his breath. "No," Su Ming said firmly. "Not yet. We need more evidence first. We can't just go in without a plan." As they drove away from the scene, Su Ming couldn't shake the feeling that he was once again caught in a web of crime he desperately wanted to escape. The shadows of his past life were looming larger, and the sense of being a crime magnet was more palpable than ever. Later that night, as Su Ming lay in bed, he reflected on the day's events. No matter how hard he tried to distance himself from crime, it seemed to find him like a lost friend. Perhaps he was destined to walk this path, to uncover the mysteries lurking in the shadows, whether he liked it or not. Chapter 10. Unraveling Threads. The next morning brought a sense of dread as Su Ming prepared for the day ahead. Despite his determination to distance himself from crime-solving, the events from the night before played on a loop in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the precipice of something significant, something that could unravel the carefully constructed facade of his life. As he arrived at the police academy, Su Ming noticed the usual buzz of activity. Students exchanged whispers and instructors discussed case studies, but there was an unusual tension in the air. He brushed it off, thinking it was just the standard pre-exam jitters. But as he walked into the lecture hall, he sensed something was amiss. "Attention, everyone," the instructor called out, her voice cutting through the chatter. "We have some urgent news regarding recent criminal activity in the downtown area. A series of high-end electronics thefts have been reported, and it seems to be part of a larger scheme. The police are investigating, and will be working closely with them on this." Su Ming's heart raced. Was this related to the warehouse incident from the night before? He exchanged glances with Jean, who was seated a few rows back. Their eyes met, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. This was becoming more serious than they had anticipated. After the lecture, Jean approached Su Ming. "We need to act fast. If the police are investigating, we could lose our chance to gather more intel," he said, urgency lacing his voice. Su Ming hesitated, weighing the risks. "If we're caught, it could blow back on us. I don't want to draw attention to myself," he replied, recalling the careful path he had attempted to carve for himself. "Look, I know you want to stay out of this, but if we can get to the bottom of this case, we might uncover something big, something that could protect us and our families," Jean insisted. Su Ming sighed, realizing that the pull of intrigue was stronger than his desire for a quiet life. "All right, but we need to be smart about this," he conceded. "Let's gather as much information as we can without drawing attention." They spent the next few days monitoring the situation. Su Ming leveraged his contacts within the network community to gather intel on the stolen goods and the suspects involved. Information flowed in like a river, with snippets revealing a web of connections that linked the thefts to various criminal organizations. On Friday afternoon, they planned to meet at their usual cafe to discuss their findings. As Su Ming approached the cafe, he noticed a group of officers stationed outside. Anxiety prickled at the back of his mind. Had they discovered something? Was he in danger of being implicated? Inside, he spotted Jean at their usual table, his expression tense. "You won't believe what I found," he said, lowering his voice. "One of the suspects is connected to a major crime syndicate. They're using the thefts as a cover for smuggling operations." Su Ming's pulse quickened. "That's big. We need to tread carefully. If the police catch wind of this, we could be in serious trouble," he warned. "Exactly. But if we can gather more evidence, we might be able to alert the police before things escalate," Jean replied, determination shining in his eyes. They devised a plan to infiltrate a meet-up location where the syndicate members were expected to discuss their operations. Su Ming felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they prepared for the following night. Despite his better judgment, the thrill of the chase was intoxicating. As they arrived at the designated location, a dimly lit warehouse, Su Ming's instincts kicked in. They parked a distance away and approached cautiously, trying to blend into the shadows. The air was thick with tension, and Su Ming could hear voices drifting from within. "Tonight's haul better be worth it," one voice grumbled, followed by the sound of rustling bags. Su Ming turned to Jean, his heart pounding. "This is it. We need to get evidence," he whispered, pulling out his phone to record the conversation. Just as they prepared to gather intel, a sudden commotion erupted inside the warehouse. A loud crash followed by shouting sent adrenaline surging through Su Ming's veins. "What the hell?" he muttered, instinctively moving closer to the door to get a better view. "Did you hear that?" Jean asked wide-eyed. "It sounds like something's gone wrong." Before Su Ming could respond, the door swung open, and a figure stumbled out. It was one of the suspects they had been tracking, looking disheveled and panicked. "We have to get out of here," he shouted, his eyes wild with fear. Su Ming exchanged a glance with Jean. "We need to move," he urged, and they quickly retreated to their car, the reality of their situation sinking in. The syndicate was onto them, and the stakes were higher than ever. As they sped away, Su Ming's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. They had inadvertently stepped into a dangerous game, and there was no turning back. The crime magnet within him was undeniable, and it seemed that no matter how hard he tried to avoid it, the world of crime was intricately woven into his existence. Later that night, Su Ming lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The thrill of the chase clashed with the weight of his responsibilities, leaving him feeling trapped in a cycle he couldn't escape. Was he destined to be pulled into the chaos, or could he carve out a life free from the shadows of his past? In his thoughts, his phone buzzed, breaking the silence. A message from Jean lit up the screen. "We need to meet. Urgent info. Can't talk over text." Su Ming's heart sank. It seemed that the game was far from over. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for what awaited him. No matter how hard he tried to distance himself, the threads of crime were entwined with his fate, and it was time to unravel them, one way or another. Chapter 11. The Echoes of Tragedy. After the chaotic events of the previous week, Su Ming finally felt a sense of closure. The syndicate's smuggling operation had been exposed, and the authorities had swooped in with arrests. Despite his reluctance, Su Ming played a key role in uncovering the operation. Jean had praised his sharp insights, but all Su Ming wanted was to step away from the crime-solving scene and return to his quiet life. Yet, as days passed, peace seemed a distant dream. The air in Longchen felt different, tense like a storm brewing. News outlets buzzed with reports of a horrifying case that had sent shockwaves across the country. 10 children, all under the age of 10, have been found murdered in various locations across the city over the past few weeks. The killings were methodical, deliberate, and the work of a cold-blooded individual who had so far managed to evade capture. Fear gripped the nation, and outrage grew as the killer remained at large. Su Ming's father, Chief Su, was deeply entrenched in the investigation. As the chief of criminal police, he led the task force assembled to catch the killer. But despite their best efforts, there had been little progress. Public pressure mounted, and the media began openly criticizing the police for their inability to catch the murderer. One evening, Su Ming sat at home, absently flipping through news channels. His father had been working late every night, trying to find any leads, but the frustration in his voice during their brief conversations was palpable. Su Ming had tried to stay out of the case, resisting the urge to get involved, but something about this one gnawed at him. The senseless cruelty of it. The innocent lives were lost. The fact that his father was under immense pressure to solve it. And then the unthinkable happened. Chief Su came home that night, looking more defeated than Su Ming had ever seen him. His mother, a rock of support in the family, silently handed him a cup of tea, her expression equally grim. Su Ming couldn't stand it anymore. "Dad," he began, hesitating slightly. "What's going on with the case? It's all over the news, and everyone's scared. Is there any progress?" Chief Su looked at him for a moment, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He set his tea down on the table, rubbing his temples. "It's difficult. We have very few leads. Whoever is doing this is smart, methodical. The children, they're chosen at random. There's no pattern in the victims. No connection between the families. And the killer leaves almost no trace behind." Su Ming felt a familiar itch in his mind, the kind that he got whenever a problem seemed unsolvable at first glance. But he fought it back. He didn't want to get involved. He had promised himself that he wouldn't dive back into this world. But then his father said something that changed everything. "We're running out of time, Ming-er. The public is losing faith in us, and more importantly, I fear that the killer isn't done. There could be more victims if we don't stop them soon." Something snapped inside Su Ming. He couldn't stand by and let this continue. Not when he knew he could help. "Let me look at the case files," Su Ming said quietly, his voice steady. His father blinked in surprise. What? Just let me take a look. I might be able to see something that's been overlooked, Su Ming insisted. Chief Su hesitated. He knew his son was sharp, but this was different. This wasn't some minor case or a smuggling ring. This was the darkest, most twisted kind of crime. Minger, this is serious. I don't want you getting involved. You've done enough already. I know, Su Ming replied, his voice firm. But I need to do this. We can't let this person keep getting away with it. After a long pause, Chief Su nodded. All right, but promise me you'll be careful. This isn't like before. Later that night, Su Ming pored over the files, immersing himself in the gruesome details of the murders. Each child's death was heartbreaking, and the lack of any clear pattern made it all the more frustrating. But Su Ming's mind worked differently. He wasn't bound by the usual methods of investigation, and his experience from his previous life as the god of criminals gave him a unique perspective. He scanned through the autopsy reports, crime scene photos, and victim profiles. Something caught his eye, a seemingly insignificant detail that the police hadn't paid much attention to. Each of the victims had been found with a small, hand-drawn symbol near their bodies. The symbol was different each time, but there was a strange consistency in the way it was drawn. Why hasn't anyone focused on these symbols? Su Ming muttered to himself. They were part of the killer's ritual, but the police hadn't connected them in any meaningful way. The next day, Su Ming met with Jean to discuss his findings. Jean had been helping him with smaller cases since the smuggling operation, and Su Ming trusted him to keep things discreet. Look at this, Su Ming said, showing Jean the crime scene photos. These symbols, they mean something. I think the killer is leaving them intentionally, but the police haven't figured out the connection. Jean frowned, studying the images. You're right. It's too deliberate to be random. Do you think it's some kind of code? Maybe. Or it could be a signature, a way of marking the crime scenes. Either way, it's the only real clue we have to work with, Su Ming replied, his mind racing. They spent the next few hours digging through old case files, looking for anything that matched the symbols. After what felt like an eternity, they found it, an old case from nearly a decade ago, involving a cult that had been active on the outskirts of the country. The cult had used similar symbols in their rituals, though they had never escalated to murder. This has to be it, Su Ming said, his voice filled with conviction. The killer might be connected to this cult. Maybe they're a former member, or maybe they were influenced by them. With this new lead in hand, Su Ming knew they were getting closer. But he also knew that time was running out. The killer wasn't going to stop, and Su Ming had a sinking feeling that the next victim was already being chosen. As he prepared to share his findings with his father, Su Ming couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He had promised himself that he wouldn't get involved in solving crimes again, but fate had other plans. The pull of the chase, the need to uncover the truth, it was inescapable. And as long as innocent lives were at stake, Su Ming knew he couldn't turn away. Chapter 12. The Hunt Begins. The revelation about the symbols reignited the investigation. Chief Su, though initially skeptical, trusted his son's instincts. With a new lead pointing to a possible cult connection, the entire task force was mobilized to focus on this angle. Old case files were reopened, and investigators combed through them, looking for any surviving members or affiliates who could provide insight. Meanwhile, Su Ming couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something crucial. He had connected the murders to the old cult, but there had to be more. The methodical nature of the killings, the precision, and the way the victims were chosen all pointed to someone with meticulous planning skills. This wasn't just random violence. This was a twisted game being played by a cold-blooded strategist. For the next few days, Su Ming stayed up late, digging deeper into the history of the cult. He hacked into government archives, accessed classified police reports, and even ventured into the dark web, where old rumors about the cult still circulated. What he found disturbed him. The cult, known as the Children of the Pure Flame, had been disbanded nearly a decade ago after a series of bizarre rituals and illegal activities were uncovered. Their leader had been arrested and died in prison, but many of the members had disappeared into obscurity. The cult believed in cleansing the world of impurity, which, in their warped view, included anyone who didn't align with their ideals, especially children. Children, Su Ming muttered, his mind working through the connections. It made sense. The children being targeted now could be seen as symbolic sacrifices to this warped ideology. The killer was likely trying to resurrect the cult's twisted vision, one victim at a time. Su Ming shared his findings with Jean, who was equally disturbed by the connection. If this is true, then the killer isn't just following a pattern. They're fulfilling some kind of sick prophecy, Jean said, frowning. I think it's more than that, Su Ming replied. Whoever is doing this isn't just a follower. They're trying to prove something, maybe to the world, or maybe to themselves. The symbols, the careful selection of the victims, it's all part of a bigger picture. As Su Ming and Jean delved further into the case, news broke that another child had been reported missing. The task force mobilized immediately, but Su Ming knew it was too late. By the time they found the child, they would already be dead. The tension in the city was palpable. Parents kept their children close, and schools increased security. But none of it seemed to matter. The killer was always one step ahead, and the police were running out of time. Then, 3 days later, the unthinkable happened. The body of the missing child was found, discarded in an alley on the outskirts of Longshan. But this time, there was a difference. The killer had left something behind, a message. It was a simple piece of paper, tucked under the child's hand. On it were the words, "The final cleansing is near." Chief Su called an emergency meeting with the task force, and Su Ming was there, watching as seasoned investigators argued over what the message meant. Some thought it was a taunt. Others believed it was a declaration that the killer was planning something even worse. Su Ming, however, had a different theory. This isn't just a message. It's a warning. The killer is preparing for something bigger, something final. We need to stop them before it's too late. The room fell silent as everyone listened to him. Chief Su nodded grimly. What do you suggest? Su Ming took a deep breath. We need to focus on the cult's remaining members. They're the key. If we can track them down, we might be able to find someone who knows what the killer is planning. The task force immediately began searching for anyone associated with the children of the Pure Flame. Over the next few days, they located a handful of former members, but none of them seemed to have any useful information. Most had renounced the cult's beliefs after it was disbanded and had tried to distance themselves from that part of their lives. But there was one man, a former high-ranking member of the cult, who stood out. His name was Feng Yin, and he had disappeared after the cult's downfall. He was never arrested, never questioned. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Until now, Su Ming and Jean tracked down Feng into a remote village on the outskirts of the city. When they arrived, the village seemed abandoned, its streets eerily quiet. But they found Feng Yin living in a dilapidated house, his appearance ragged and disheveled. He had aged significantly since his time in the cult, but the moment he saw them, he knew why they had come. I don't know anything, he said, his voice shaking. I left all that behind. I'm not part of it anymore. Su Ming stared at him for a long moment before speaking. We're not here to drag you back into that life. We just need information. Someone is killing children, using the same methods your cult used. We think they're trying to revive the Pure Flame. Feng Yin's eyes widened in fear. No, it can't be. The Pure Flame, it's dead. We made sure of that when we scattered after the leader was arrested. No one would be foolish enough to bring it back. But someone is, Jean said firmly. And we need to stop them. Feng Yin hesitated, his gaze flickering between Su Ming and Jean. There was one follower. He was obsessed. Even after the leader was arrested, he continued the rituals in secret. We all thought he would be the next to go down, but he disappeared. His name was Cheng Wu. Su Ming's heart raced. This was the lead they had been searching for. Where is he? I don't know, Feng Yin said, his voice barely a whisper. But if he's still alive, he's more dangerous than any of us ever were. With this new information, Su Ming and Jean hurried back to the city. They had a name now, and that was all they needed. Cheng Wu was out there, somewhere, and if they didn't find him soon, more lives would be lost. As they raced against time, Su Ming couldn't shake the feeling that this case was only the beginning. Cheng Wu's obsession with the Pure Flame meant that the worst was yet to come. And Su Ming, despite his desire for a quiet life, knew he couldn't escape the pull of justice. Crime seemed to follow him wherever he went, Like a shadow he could never outrun. Chapter 13. The Web of Deceit. The atmosphere in Longchen grew heavier with each passing day. Fear gripped the hearts of its citizens, and the police force was under immense pressure to bring the child killer to justice. Chief Su and his team doubled their efforts, but Su Ming knew that time was running out. Cheng Wu was somewhere in the city, likely planning his next move. Su Ming sat quietly at his desk in the police station, his fingers idly tapping against the keyboard. His mind raced through the facts, trying to piece together the clues. There had to be a way to find Cheng Wu, but so far, the man had been a ghost. No records, no sightings, no traces. The cult's influence ran deeper than Su Ming had initially realized. Even after its supposed downfall, remnants of its ideology had lingered, quietly festering in the shadows. And now, it seemed, Cheng Wu had brought it back to life. Jean walked over, interrupting his thoughts. We've been cross-referencing everything we have on Cheng Wu. Nothing so far, but I think we're close. Feng had mentioned a few locations where the cult used to meet in secret. We're checking them out now. Su Ming nodded. It's a long shot, but it's all we have. Any sign of unusual activity in the city? Jean sighed. None. But knowing Cheng Wu, he's not going to just wait for us to catch him. He's planning something big, and we have to stop him before he strikes again. As they spoke, Su Ming's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. An anonymous message had appeared. It was a string of coordinates, followed by a cryptic message. The flame is never extinguished. Come alone, or more will burn. Su Ming felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this was a trap, but he couldn't ignore it. The coordinates pointed to an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of Longchen, far from the prying eyes of the city. Cheng Wu was challenging him, drawing him into the final act of this twisted game. I've got a lead, Su Ming said, standing up, but I need to handle this on my own. Jean frowned. You know that's not a good idea. This could be dangerous, especially if Cheng Wu is involved. I know, Su Ming replied. But if we want to stop him, we have to play by his rules. I'll be fine. Reluctantly, Jean agreed, but not without a warning. Be careful. Cheng Wu isn't someone to underestimate. As night fell, Su Ming made his way to the abandoned factory. The area was desolate, the building looming in the darkness like a forgotten relic of the past. He parked his car a few blocks away, approaching on foot. The factory had long since been abandoned, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. Su Ming could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on him as he crept through the shadows, his senses on high alert. Inside, the factory was even more decrepit. Rusted machinery stood as silent sentinels, and the air smelled of decay and neglect. Su Ming moved cautiously, scanning his surroundings for any sign of Cheng Wu or his followers. Then a flicker of movement caught his eye. In the center of the factory floor, a single figure stood, his back turned. He was dressed in a long coat, and in his hand he held a burning torch. The flames cast eerie shadows on the walls, creating an otherworldly glow. Cheng Wu, Su Ming called out, his voice steady. The figure turned slowly, revealing a man with hollow eyes and a face etched with fanaticism. Cheng Wu's expression was calm, almost serene, as if he had accepted the inevitable. You've come, just as I knew you would. I didn't have much of a choice, Su Ming replied, his gaze never leaving the torch in Cheng Wu's hand. This ends here. Cheng Wu chuckled softly. You think you can stop the pure flame? You're too late. The cleansing has already begun. Soon, the world will be purified. Su Ming's eyes narrowed. You're delusional. Killing innocent children won't change anything. Innocent? Cheng Wu's voice grew sharp. They're the key to our salvation. Through their sacrifice, we will bring about a new world, free from the corruption of the past. Su Ming could see the madness in Cheng Wu's eyes, the fanatical devotion to his cause. There would be no reasoning with him, no way to convince him to stop. The only way to end this was through force. Without warning, Cheng Wu hurled the torch to the ground, igniting a circle of fire around him. The flames roared to life, creating a barrier between him and Su Ming. You won't stop me, Cheng Wu shouted, his voice rising above the crackling flames. "The flame will never die." Su Ming cursed under his breath. He had to act fast. The fire was spreading quickly, and the factory's old, dry wood only fueled the blaze. Su Ming darted around the edge of the flames, searching for a way through. Just as he found an opening, Cheng Wu pulled out a knife, his eyes wild with desperation. "This is the end, Su Ming. The flame will consume us all." Su Ming reacted instinctively. He dodged the first swipe of the knife and lunged forward, disarming Cheng Wu with a swift strike. The knife clattered to the ground, and Cheng Wu stumbled back, disoriented. At that moment, Su Ming saw his opportunity. He grabbed Cheng Wu by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "It's over." Cheng Wu's expression twisted into a grim smile. "You may have stopped me, but the flame will live on. There are others, more than you know. The cleansing is far from over." Before Su Ming could respond, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Jean and the task force had arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the night. Su Ming released Cheng Wu, who slumped to the ground, defeated. The fire was quickly extinguished, and the factory was secured. As Jean approached, Su Ming felt a sense of relief wash over him. "We got him," Su Ming said, his voice tired but resolute. Jean nodded. "Yeah, but something tells me this isn't the end." Su Ming glanced down at Cheng Wu, who was being led away in handcuffs. He knew Jean was right. The cult's influence ran deeper than they had anticipated, and there were still many unanswered questions. But for now, the immediate threat had been neutralized. Su Ming had stopped Cheng Wu, but the shadow of the pure flame would linger for a long time to come. As the night faded into dawn, Su Ming allowed himself a moment of peace. The hunt was over for now, but deep down, he knew that crime would always find him, no matter how hard he tried to escape it. Chapter 14. The Sins of the Past. The aftermath of Cheng Wu's arrest had sent shockwaves throughout Longshan. News of the child killer's capture spread quickly, and for the first time in weeks, the city breathed a collective sigh of relief. But beneath the surface, Su Ming knew that a new darkness was lurking, something far worse than Cheng Wu's madness. 2 days after the arrest, Su Ming found himself sitting in his father's office. Chief Su's face was grim, his usual stern demeanor more intense than usual. On the desk in front of him lay a case file, its contents hidden beneath a thick manila folder. The room was filled with an oppressive silence. "Son," Chief Su began, his voice heavy with emotion. "There's something you need to know. This case, it's personal." Su Ming raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. His father rarely showed any signs of vulnerability, especially when it came to work. Chief Su opened the folder and slid a photograph across the desk. Su Ming picked it up and immediately felt his heart drop. The image showed a small, pale child, no older than 10, lying motionless on a cold metal table. The child's eyes were closed, his face serene, but the truth was undeniable. He was dead. "This is one of 10 children," Chief Su continued, his voice faltering slightly. 10 children, all murdered in the same way over the past few years. The media doesn't know the full extent of this case. We've kept it quiet for now, but we've hit a wall. And now, we're asking for your help. Su Ming's mind raced as he flipped through the rest of the photographs. Each one was more heartbreaking than the last. Innocent children, their lives cut short by a madman who had evaded capture for far too long. "I've read about this case," Su Ming finally said, "but I didn't realize how close it hit home." Chief Su nodded slowly. "One of those children, his parents were my old friends. Good people. And they were devastated when they lost him. The killer, he doesn't just take lives. He leaves a trail of broken families in his wake." Su Ming remained silent, absorbing the weight of his father's words. This wasn't just any case. It was a direct assault on the very fabric of their society, one that tore at the heart of every parent who lived in fear for their children. "There's more," Chief Su said, sliding another folder toward him. "We've received information that this killer isn't working alone. There's a network behind him, one that's been operating in the shadows for years. And now, it seems they're planning something much bigger." Su Ming's eyes narrowed as he scanned the contents of the new folder. It was filled with reports from various sources, anonymous tips, surveillance photos, and connections to a series of underground criminal operations. But one thing stood out: the name of a criminal syndicate that had been whispered about in police circles for years. The Crimson Phoenix Syndicate. Su Ming's blood ran cold at the mention of the name. He had heard of them before, an elusive and powerful organization known for their ruthlessness and their involvement in human trafficking, drugs, and murder. They had always managed to stay one step ahead of law enforcement, slipping through the cracks of the legal system like smoke. And now, it seemed, they had their claws in this child murderer. What do we know about them? Su Ming asked, his tone serious. Not much, Chief Su admitted. But we believe they're operating across several regions, using coded messages and untraceable accounts to fund their activities. They've been careful, too careful. But we think they're planning something big, and it involves more than just the murder of these children. Su Ming's mind began to churn, his instincts kicking into high gear. The Crimson Phoenix Syndicate was no ordinary criminal organization. If they were involved in these murders, it meant they had an agenda, something far more sinister than anyone had anticipated. And it wasn't just about the children. It was about control. Su Ming closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. His father watched him carefully, waiting for his response. The weight of the request was clear. Chief Su was asking him to step into the shadows, to track down a monster that had eluded them for years. But Su Ming knew there was no turning back. The lives of 10 children had already been lost, and countless more were at risk if the killer and his network were allowed to continue. I'll take the case, Su Ming said firmly. But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more ground they gain. Chief Su nodded, relief evident in his eyes. I trust you'll handle this with the same determination you've shown before. But remember, this isn't just another case. These people, they're dangerous. Be careful. I will, Su Ming replied, standing up from his chair. He picked up the folder and tucked it under his arm. I'll start digging into the Crimson Phoenix Syndicate. We need to find their weak points, figure out how they're operating, and shut them down. As Su Ming left the office, his mind was already racing with possibilities. He knew this would be one of the most dangerous cases he'd ever taken on, but he couldn't walk away, not when innocent lives were at stake. And somewhere out there, the child killer was still on the loose. A monster hiding in plain sight, waiting for his next victim. Su Ming's eyes darkened with resolve. He would find this murderer. He would bring him to justice, no matter what it took.